Thank you so much for joining us this evening. This very special panel conversation on the occasion of our exhibition Taste and Decency. My name's Paul Luckraft, Head of Programme here at Gazelli Art House. Thank you for joining us on such a sweltering day. As you can see, we've got aircon here, so we are set fair, but do appreciate you joining us. In the exhibition, there are 5 amazing artists, 2 of whom we have here today, Rosie Gibbens, Rachel Maclean. Also on view, we have works by Jan Howarth, Olivia Sterling, and Idel Weber behind me and upstairs as well. So after the conversation, there'll be a chance to see the exhibition. And I think the conversation will, of course, focus on Rosie and Rachel's work, moderated by Joe Applin. But there'll be, I think, a chance to also learn more about the work of the other artists and think about this kind of question around pop art across different generations. What is kind of persists, what remains, what's shifted, what's changed across different approaches by artists that might share concerns and materials, but perhaps push and pull that conversation in different directions. Some brief introductions. Rosie Gibbens lives and works in London. Solo exhibitions and performances include those at Riga Art Week, The Box at Pippi Holdsworth in London, Arkham Museum, Copenhagen, The Bomb Factory, London, Shoreditch Arts Club with Data Editions, London, and Zabludovich Collection, London. And also group shows like London Open, Whitechapel Gallery, The Artist is Naked at Kunstpalais Erlangen in Germany, and Are You Working Now at National Taiwan Museum of Fine Arts, and Body Poetics at Giant in Bournemouth. Rosie also curates amazing programs of performance and installation as well, and is currently on a scholarship at Morley College in London. Rachel Maclean lives and works in Glasgow. Solo exhibitions and commissions include those at FACT in Liverpool, Kunsthalle in Germany, Jupiter Artland near Edinburgh, the National Gallery in London, Zabludovich Collection, National Gallery of Australia, Dublin City Art Gallery, Talbot Rice in Edinburgh, Tate Britain Home in Manchester. Rachel also represented Scotland in Venice in 2017 and has undertaken many major commissions for others such as BBC and Channel 4. And the new FAT commission, the new film piece, is also on in London at Josh Lilly Gallery currently, which I recommend getting a chance to see. And hosting tonight's conversation is Professor Joe Applin, Professor History of Art at the Courtauld in London, an esteemed writer and curator. Curated the 2025 exhibition Abstract Erotic, Louise Bourgeois, Eva Hess, Alice Adams at the Courtauld Gallery, and also the 2016 show called Flesh, a major loan exhibition of over 80 works at York Art Gallery. Joe is author of many publications on Lee Lozano, Alison Wilding, and a book called Eccentric Objects, Rethinking Sculpture in the 1960s of America. And Joe is currently writing a new book about art and aging. One of those chapters has just appeared in early form as an essay for the journal Art History, focusing on 1960s soft sculpture by Jan Howarth, or focusing around that point of Jan's pioneering work in the 1960s. So the conversation will be 30, 35 minutes, but also a chunk of time for questions at the end. Enjoy the aircon and a drink, and enjoy the conversation. I'll hand over to Joe. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great. I see. Thanks, Paul. Thank you. Well, I'm really delighted to be here. I'm a huge admirer of both of these artists' works. I'm also a huge admirer of Olivia's work, and we have one of her paintings here and upstairs, and of course, Jan, we have her Linda doll to the side here. So I think I know why I've been asked to moderate this. I'm interested in, I've never really framed it as such, questions of taste and decency, but certainly works that seem to kind of push against the boundaries of what we expect or think work should do, or questions that art can pose. I'm not really interested in a particular aesthetic style. I think I'm driven by kind of outliers and moments of difference, particularly in work, but not exclusively in work by women artists. And that's something that's very important, of course, to this exhibition too. And so, I mean, I'm drawn to both of your work for very different reasons. I think we're going to talk through some of those themes today. We've had a very brief exchange about what some of those themes might be. I could see lots of overlaps and intersections, and I can see loads of very, very different ways in which you both go about doing things. But I thought what would be really nice for everybody here would be if you could each maybe speak a little to the theme of the exhibition, taste and decency, as that suits you, as a way to kind of maybe introduce some of your works or projects that we've got here before we then dive in a bit more detail. We didn't decide who would go first. Would you like to start with?
Taste and Decency. I love the title of this show. I think it's great. And I also loved seeing these works in this context. I suppose as a way to talk about it, one of the first times I think I got a sense of what kind of art I wanted to make was in first year at art college, where I was taught by this tutor who made like very brown, kind of like masculine, big abstract paintings. And I bought from B&Q a little tub of pink emulsion paint. And he was so disgusted by the idea of me painting in pink that he like held the pot up in front of the whole class and was kind of showed me up for it. And I was like, oh, I kind of like this feeling. I like the feeling that he's offended by this. And I like the fact that he's maybe not aware of the reasons why he's offended by this. So I think that idea of taste and decency, that you're wanting to kind of push back against something, or you're wanting to, at some level, make people feel a little bit disgusted and then maybe question the reasons for that. Like, why do you find pink repulsive? Is it because you associate it with women? Or like, so yeah.
Yeah, great, thank you. And
Yeah, I think maybe Paul asked me because I feel like in my performances I'm a bit indecent sometimes. And I also enjoy pushing that and kind of maybe starting in a way that feels quite poised or feels like it's an image of a woman that you might have seen before in a certain situation. And then kind of breaking that down by doing something maybe explicit or maybe absurd or hopefully a mix of both. And I think for me, that kind of inserts something unruly into those figures.
I think unruly is the word for this, and that kind of indecency, because it does reveal something else. It isn't just there's something kind of deeply disquieting or uncomfortable, isn't there, that these kinds of works can make people feel when they're confronted with it. And I think for me as a historian, really an art historian, really focused really on art of the 1960s through to the contemporary. And really in that decade, that was a moment where, this is the moment of pop art, but it's also a moment where a lot of artists, a lot of women are beginning to work in outrageous ways. That didn't necessarily always serve them. We're tending to find out about who they are much later. But I think Jan Howarth would certainly be one of these artists who, she's American, but she comes to London in the early 60s and she just kind of decides to stay. Can you imagine this? She just went and asked the Slade if she could enroll, and they said yes. And she also enrolled in some art history courses at the Courtauld. And she entered into their program as one of very few women and discovered that working with textiles, fabrics, soft sculpture was a skill set that she'd learned from her female relatives. But that wasn't what interested her. What interested her was that she had something that the men didn't have. She had a route into doing something that no one else could do. And she says, Eduardo Paolozzi in the studio said, if you want to be taken seriously, you have to cast that in bronze. And that was it's a real moment. It's like that pot of pink paint. It was just considered like an affront in some way. And I think for me, as an art historian, I think there's also something kind of deeply like wildly feminist too in being inappropriate and challenging. And that maybe is harder to do at art school. Or did you carry on being inappropriate after the pot of
I think it's
the incident?
Yeah. I think it's an interesting idea though, that like as a female artist, it's harder to be accepted if you make work that's feminine than if you make work that's masculine. It's almost like the most acceptable thing you can do is work in a kind of masculine mode, and at least you can pretend to be a man. But if you actually kind of embody something that is feminine, it's much more difficult for people to deal with that. Or it comes.
Yeah. And there's certain triggers in that. So pink continues to be a theme here, I think. And also in your show up at Josh Lilly at the moment, an amazing kind of bursts of kind of inappropriate colours and curtains that are kind of draping that space in a way that you immediately know you've entered somewhere that isn't supposed to be what a gallery looks like. That was my first impression. It was deliberate kind of an inappropriate setting that you kind of produce, which I think, in a way for you with your performances, you're immediately putting your audience on the back foot in some way. Do you feel that? Is that just my experience of performance? But I always feel somehow slightly unnerved. I don't know what's going to happen.
I'm glad to hear it. I mean, I think what immediately I originally drew with your work so much is like that real like reveling in these symbols of femininity, like frills and lace and fluff, and like it's such a feast for the eyes. It's so like delicious to look at, and then it's kind of undermined, but like simultaneously undermined and also not belittled. And I think that's also what pop artists are doing too.
Yeah, not belittled. It's not. It's deeply serious. I mean, both of your practices, obviously, that's why we do the things we do, because they are important and serious, but it's a very perverse way of being serious, isn't it, that you both engage with. And I think that that's something. So, I mean, Rachel, do you want to talk to us a bit about it?
So yeah, this is a body of work. I made it for a show at Courtauld Gleeson about 2 years ago. So, well, I know it's exactly 2 years ago because I made it at the time that my second daughter was born, and she's 2 now. So I made it, or the idea kind of came to me when I was breastfeeding, like about 3 weeks after giving birth, and in this kind of sleep deprived state where I just had to keep myself awake. And I found this generative AI app, which seemed to be the only thing that could keep me awake, and was typing like mother and child into it. And what I thought was really interesting about some of the results is that a lot of what pops up was recognizable from like art history or kind of popular culture, but in a lot of cases the body of the mother and the child were kind of merged together, because AI models, they understand images but they've never like existed in the world. They can reproduce a chair, somebody's sitting in a chair but they've never sat in a chair, so you get these odd glitches that a human would never produce, like the arm goes through the armrest of the chair. So I thought this is really interesting because it's like seeing the world from an entirely different perspective, and also seeing the world from a perspective which I could really relate to after giving birth, this sense of like what felt like before your singular identity suddenly becoming, you grow another person inside you, and even after they're born it still feels like they're a bit part of you, and it's very beautiful and also unsettling. So I wanted to create work that had that quality to it. The work kind of became much more sophisticated than me typing stuff into an app on my phone, but it's taken a little bit from Rococo painting, but also I wanted to capture something of like the aesthetic of the baby shower, and for there to be this feeling of the aesthetic of motherhood or the aesthetic of babies, this very like saccharine kind of perfect world, is on the surface, but then there's some part of like a real experience or reality that's pushing through from beneath the surface.
So what's so interesting there is that you're seeing that, but somehow that generative AI is also doing, it's not seeing any, it's doing that work. You're seeing that it's doing that. So do some of these images are they based in some of the images that it produced?
Yeah, so the process kind of became, so I made a series of paintings. There's 15 paintings, and then also videos which were made through me training AI models on my past work, and then also training AI models in paintings and making videos from that. So there's quite kind of like circular process. And what I was drawn to was these kind of glitches where bodies kind of merge or materials merge, or the sense of like kind of reality or surface or collapsing in itself a little bit.
Yeah, and the bodies don't quite work. I mean, and that's something we are sitting in front of one of your works, which is, for me, in a way, it's a body completely in pieces, and bodies don't quite work. And I think so. We'll come back to the technology of the glitch, I think. But that was really great. Thank you. Do you want to say a few words about the work?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much in that I want to draw from, but I'll talk about mine. So there's 2 works in different series and times. This one is a quilt that's stitched together from what was originally a number of individual pillows. I was asked to do a performance and make something for this fancy dinner, and I thought I would use like images of holes that go kind of into or out of my body to think about digestion and eating somewhat. Also, because that is the the definition of the abject is like crossing the border between in and out, which also is what I was thinking in terms of your these bodies. There's something so kind of romanticized about motherhood and birth, but actually it is the fundamental like definition of abjection, right? Is like something that was in then being whoa. Anyway. And oh yeah, so there were these cushions. Then there was one cushion that also had a hole in the chair so that I could lie underneath it like this with my face out. And what I wanted is at the dinner, I wanted someone to have to come and sit on me while they ate their dinner, because I thought that would make them really like aware of their digestion and anything that might happen. And for me, it would also be like a sort of, I would kind of put myself in a submissive role there, which would feel quite uncomfortable for both of us. And I was sort of intrigued by that dynamic. They weren't too keen on me doing it at the actual dinner, but I did it at the sort of private view bit, I guess. And I lay under there for a few hours, and I was chewing gum, and we were. I had a little like Britney mic, which was playing out the sound of the chewing, so it was just like, like that horrible lippy sound. So this is kind of where that came from, and then it became this quilt. So I like that it's had that journey, and I called it Demodex quilt, which is the name of these mites that live in your eyelashes. Apparently, they have sex on your eyelashes when you're sleeping, according to BuzzFeed, which I'm sure is very reliable. And yeah, they kind of. I actually just I kind of cobbled it together from all of these printouts that I already had in my studio. So in a way that I'm interested in like fragmenting the body, I'm also kind of fragmenting all of these scraps of fabric and combining them in new ways. And then upstairs, there's 3 sculptures and 1 video from this series I made called Planned Obsolescence. So I guess it kind of broadly speaking looks at like the digital and physical body and kind of switching between the two of those. And it's inspired partly by this thing called the Human Project, which is the Visible Human Project. I think it's called that. Basically, they get a body and then they slice it up into lots of little slices, and then they scan everyone so you can click through like da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I was at the time really interested in printing and scanning, 3D scanning, 2D scanning, and thinking about combining bodies with printers to be a sort of low-tech cyborg type thing. So I liked this kind of medical scan, and that was the next stage of the series. And in one of the scans, you can also see a 3D print of myself, which I'm then kind of dressing up as in the video, kind of trying to make myself become digital, but it ultimately fails, and it's kind of quite slapstick. Hopefully you've seen it, so that makes sense.
Thank you. I mean, so that theme of abjection, literally the thing that you expel from your body, but also the kind of the kind of icky and uncomfortable side of it. I mean, you see it in your film at Josh Lilly, but we see it here too in very different ways. So your description here is a world apart, isn't it, from the kind of the saccharine kind of cutesiness of these images, but they do share a discomfort. So what were you said you had lots of things that you wanted to say about Rachel's work. Let's hear them.
Well, I just feel really inspired by what you said, essentially. But I think there's something, I mean, I did a series, I have a 2-year-old child as well, so we have similar age, and I made a series when I was pregnant called Parabiosis, which was looking at these experiments where they conjoined rats together so that they would share like a physiological system. And there's lots of evidence that shows that the younger rat kind of improves the blood of the older rat and kind of makes it test younger. So I got kind of interested in that in terms of like fetus. Some people use kind of language of like the parasite, which I feel like is a bit, but also it kind of, it's sort of taking away from you and giving to you at the same time. And that kind of dynamic was what I was thinking about in relation to what you said.
Yeah, I wanted them to have like a slightly kitsch quality where they're not real paintings, but you might think they're real paintings, or they're filmed for a moment, or there's a sense of kind of fakeness.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is kind of horrifying. I mean, I think that you've lit upon something that is so kind of powerful and very upsetting about AI. And we could talk a little bit more about your other practices where you've drawn on technology and the body in very kind of clumsy ways. Would you like to?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that title, Planned Obsolescence, comes from, when they make iPads or whatever, and they're planning for it to fail after a certain number of years, so you have to buy another one. So I'm very intrigued by that kind of intersection of corporate control and then technology, and wondering about how, as our body becomes increasingly combined with technology in the future, what that says. And I suppose my kind of fears for the cyborg body is that you wonder who's going to kind of control it and things. But I suppose in general, I'm quite intrigued by using technology of the past to think about the future and kind of make parallels there, which I think is something you do really well in your show.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's kind of, going against the sort of future vision of technology, or that kind of like white space sort of cyborg idea where especially with AI technology, it's trained on data from the past. It's always drawing from the past. There's a sense that everything it reproduces is kind of coming from something historic. Yeah, so technology in my work, I think I'm always drawn to like new technology because often technology is made without people really knowing why they've made it. And there's this search at the moment or for, I guess, arms race for like artificial general intelligence. So whoever gets to that point first. But I don't think it's absolutely clear, at least to me, why there is this push towards that, apart from it just being a kind of like pursuit or kind of at some level of the egos of these men that are pursuing this idea. So I feel like you're dealing with a technology that the jury's still out on what it's for exactly. And especially with some of the models I used to make this work, you're seeing all the kind of glitches before they're ironed out, and you're able to kind of find potentials in the technology before a use has been found for them and all of that stuff disappears.
I think I found it really interesting in your, sorry if you haven't seen the other show, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit. I thought it was really interesting how in their sort of race, two characters are having like the guy who was sort of winning, his character is sort of more sexualized. And I guess it kind of made me think about who's making the parameters that's judging what's the most successful aesthetic AI conclusion. I don't know, is that right?
Yeah, I think you're right, actually. But that's a good observation. I don't think I did it totally intentionally. But yeah, so about the film, I don't know if I can.
Yes.
So I made a new
Although
film.
how you begin to explain this is going to be
Yeah, I know.
to hear.
A new film, They've Got Your Eyes, which is on show at Clacton Liverpool and also Josh's Lily Gallery in London. And is a film and also a series of expanded paintings, artworks around it. But the film follows a gentleman who's maybe kind of like a Scottish Enlightenment come sort of Victorian figure, come tech bro, who generates a fairy, and the fairy becomes this metaphor for AI technology. And he encounters another gentleman who also generates a fairy, but a better one. And it becomes a kind of arms race between these two men for supremacy. So it's a sort of larger comment on our relationship to AI technology and also the kind of AI arms race.
I mean, it's questions of power, I suppose, isn't it? So that you saw one of the one who's winning is a sexualized figure. Maybe it's about power.
And also, I think it's the sense of, I suppose I wrote the film around like you're coming at the perspective of this gentleman who I suppose at some level is like got quite a fragile ego. So he's jealous of this man who seems more masculine than him. Or, yeah. So you're seeing it through his eyes. And stuff.
And technology for you, I was thinking about some of your other performances and so on, but as well upstairs, there's something much more kind of analog in some ways that you're working with, that nonetheless you work with. The work upstairs, the film, the recording of the. I don't even have the
like the photo, like a photogrammetry scan.
The printed figure and so on. So could you talk a bit about? Well, I think it would be nice to hear both of you talk a bit about your processes, really, your working processes, because I think although in terms of themes and I think in a way politics like broadly understood, I think that there's a lot of meaning that's been shared around, but the way that you come at your practice are very different. And I think it would be nice to see how you see that different.
Sure, I think that.
Yeah.
Well, I work in quite distinct series, which last maybe 2 to 3 years, which I find really helpful because it kind of structures my sort of conceptual thinking. And from that series, there might be multiple different outcomes in different mediums. And those are usually based on a specific area of research that's like, I feel like sometimes when artists say area of research, it makes it sound much more complicated than it is. It's just some books around it, like an interesting thing that I've found that I've been reading. And then I usually think of a title, and then from that, different things will come. So, for example, there was that series I spoke about earlier, the parabiosis series, which is what really caught my imagination was just that hearing about those 2 rats. And then from that, I kind of expanded it out more into thinking about anti-aging and also the experience of being pregnant and kind of combine those together. And then in terms of how ideas come, it's kind of hard to answer. They just sort of come. How do your ideas come?
We were talking earlier about the idea of like because this body of work I've just made has been so exhausting where I'm like, I just need to not have an idea for a few months, because the minute you have an idea, you're like, I've got to make it.
And
And it's like,
kind of gestation, like this, the
I
project.
don't know. Yeah, it did. But the idea was like, I don't know if you experience ideas like this, that once you've got it, you're like, oh God, I've got to make it now. Like I've got to like exercise it from, but yeah, back to the question. What was the question? So,
Process.
so process, I keep changing my process, which maybe I should like stay put for a little while. But I suppose for the most consistent thing I've been doing since I was at art college is working with green screen technology and shooting myself in front of green screen. I started off like miming to find audio, so audio from films and YouTube, chopping that together and then miming and playing these different characters that kind of look nothing like me. So dressing up in costume and prosthetic makeup and creating these quite kind of surreal and sort of candy colored worlds. And then I moved on more recently to employing AI technology. So my film Duck does the same thing, but with deepfake. So basically, instead of prosthetic makeup or a kind of costume, it's deepfake technology that transforms me, in this case, into Sean Connery and also Marilyn Monroe. And my most recent film is kind of a mashup almost of these two processes, where I've shot the whole film on green screen and then trained AI models on my face, so my image and also my past work. So, which has been kind of quite uncanny in that I've got used to the idea that to replicate myself, I need to photograph myself, or film myself. But in this case, I trained a model which can reproduce an image of me without me even needing to be there. So I've kind of mashed up these two processes and made a world which, to a certain extent, is about the bias nature of AI technology, that you can really, AI is based on whatever you train it, what's in the training data is what ultimately it reproduces. So there's this AI model of me that basically, you feed in a photograph of a wine glass and it's going to try and force my face onto it somehow. So it's this like quite queasy bias world that just reproduces me.
So is AI now part of your practice, or is it this discrete project? Because on the one hand, it's clearly just such a critique and horror of what it can do. You're fascinated by it as well, right? And you're seeing its potential for you as an artist.
Yeah, I mean, there's aspects of it that to me are like creatively really interesting and quite exciting, where so I normally, I guess, the experience of shooting a film, at least on green screen, is there's a lot of restrictions in what you can do. Like if you even move a camera on green screen, you've got to motion track it, and that's like huge amount of money, huge amount of time. But with this film, I could just move the camera, and I was able to like apply an AI effect, and it takes away like a lot of manual things which actually restrict you creatively. And then I think what was on top of that kind of mad is that, for example, like normally on a film, you shoot me looking like this and then get into post. Like what I'm wearing is not going to change. And if you did want to change what I was wearing, it would cost you like a huge amount of money and probably not look very good. But with this process, I run in an image of me and it just puts me in a white t-shirt, and you don't ask it to, it just does it. So it's like you're working with this technology which is constantly changing your idea. And like the Victorian gentleman, it just kept putting him in a rucksack, and I was like, oh God, like can I run with this? Or so it kind of, for me, unlocked something I got used to in filmmaking, where there's like locking, you lock the script, you lock the edit, you lock stuff at different points. It just kept unlocking things. So you were kind of creative, like right up to the end. And I can't stop changing this film because I have the power to. I don't need to go back and shoot anything. So it's kind of like, to me, it's been like a really quite exciting creative process.
It's been revolutionary then in terms of how you can work. I mean, this raises the question that is fascinating in both of your works, which is the role of performance, or the performance of self. I mean, you perform yourself or a version of self. You take on a cast of characters that's never you, but it's sometimes recognizably you, sort of. So how do you feel? I mean, this is what you're trained in, performance. This is something that goes to the heart of what you do. Is it expedient for you to use yourself, or is it important part of what you do. It'd be interesting to hear you both about. Perhaps if we could start with you while you're talking. Yeah.
It started being something that was just handy. And I kind of came from that idea of like looking at performance artists who use their own body. And the minute I started doing it, I was like, I don't think I'm interested in me or anything authentic. I'm almost interested in how easy it is to become somebody else or fool somebody and to create an illusion, basically. So a lot of my work often sets up stereotypes. So I've done like a lot of work that's about Scottish stereotypes and stereotypes of the Scotsman, but does so in a way that like pushes it to such an extent that it starts to complicate or kind of undermine the stereotype. But I'm always trying to be somebody other than me.
Yeah.
But in this new film, it's probably the most me because
Yes, I think, yeah.
I've like I also use my voice with AI models, so all the voices have a little bit like my accent. So it's a little bit more like clearly derived from me in an intentional way than anything I've done before.
Interesting, but the expediency, that is very interesting. Whereas for you, where's yourself in your performances?
Well, I sort of also just did it from convenience to start with.
Okay.
And that I was making these costumes that could turn people into different domestic appliances. And I sort of then realized, somebody had to operate them, and it was me. And then over time, I had to really like reconcile with myself in terms of trying to see it from an outside view and think about the kind of associations that I look like have for other people, and kind of unpack that in terms of like gender and femininity and race and many other things that like are associated with my body, which I have to kind of think about. Although at the same time, I also can't think about it because I can't help it. But I think I'm also really interested in stereotypes, and I think that it comes through kind of embodying different images of like the ways that I can present myself. But at the end of the day, it does come back to me, like I'm not building any kind of narrative structure around a character or anything. Although I do kind of see my performance self as slightly other to my actual self, in that she dresses differently, acts differently, poses differently, but I'm kind of purposefully very untrained in terms of performance. I just sort of do things, like perform actions, do tasks and things.
And is that about having a bit of a barrier between the audience and yourself? You take on a more exaggerated version of yourself, or just a slightly different self? Is that a form of preservation or defense, or it just that's obvious to you that that's how you would go about it?
Well, I think as soon as you put something to be looked at, it's no longer real in some ways. And so I'm kind of interested in putting items alongside or on my body that then drive towards other associations, like medical, like corporate, fetish, all sorts.
Yeah, thank you. So I wanted to ask you both about consumption, and I think this show, taste, decency, propriety, it's also bound up with the kind of consumption. I think Olivia's work is completely brilliant on this as well. We have a kind of extraordinary kind of chaotic seeming here of consumption. It's really kind of a classic example of the way that she works at the moment. We have some of Jan Howard's soft donuts on a shelf here that she first made in the early 60s. You've talked about digestion and the kind of the sound of you chewing, and upstairs those works that look like they're innards about to burst out in a very abject way. They're very contained in the shape. And I was thinking with your work as well, you talk about AI kind of slop, and is that what the kind of the kind of the green goo that we see in your film? So I just thought, did you have any thoughts around? I mean, you've already started to talk a bit about this, but consumption, and because it's such a term, it's so tied to pop art, which I think it's that moment of kind of extreme displays of consumption.
Yeah, I guess it's about desire, isn't it? Desire and excess, and kind of gorging, whether that's on products or culture or food, or like too much content.
Yeah, I agree. It's like that sort of tipping point where you eat too much cake and it tastes great, and then you feel sick. It's like I'm kind of want to achieve that in an artistic form where it's like too much to the point that it kind of tips into its opposite and becomes something horrible or
For the viewer, you would like
for the
them to have
viewer.
no experience.
I
that.
think so, yeah.
Yeah. Do you
That
like us to feel like that too, somehow?
I can dream, I can wish.
But it's a very particular, it's kind of coercive in a way, which in the best way, it's a placing a pressure on the audience to feel uncomfortable with it. But to recognize something in it as well. I think both of your, we can recognize maybe ourselves, but understand what's going on in that kind of upsetting excess. Maybe it's because of the question of desire, which I think is what you've raised, that there's desire. I think that's the right word.
There's a bit in your film that I think about so often. In the one, the Pinocchio one. No, it's the one, and it's a bit with the long sausage, and they're cutting the sausage, and it has a smiley face and a savage. It literally like lives in my mind all the time.
that was sausage was such a nightmare to make because like it was those like Billy Bear ham. So where you like slice it and there's like a Billy Bear running right through. I just couldn't find anywhere that can make that. Basically the sausage is like an emoji, but if you imagine it like a Billy Bear ham where you cut it and it like the slice looks like an emoji.
Yeah.
So we just had to like paint it on with makeup, which was like deeply unsatisfying to me.
But you wanted it to be real.
Still achieve the.
Oh my God, but it's very powerful. And with
both
the Colin the caterpillar kind of slices upstairs Olivia's painting as well, which made me think of that kind of consumption too. So what about the humour? There's a certain kind of humour, and this humour in art fascinates me. I don't, what does it mean for an artwork to be funny? What does funny mean in that context? I think it's powerful and sort of a complicated emotion. Is it an emotion reaction? Freud had things to say about it, but we all know what funny is, but we all have different versions of it. Is that witty? So do you must think about humor, you must be looking to kind of it's one of the provocations.
I think so. I think there's also something about art to me that like I think it's why it's so easy to satirize art because it takes itself like very seriously, but often people do ridiculous things, like it's ridiculous things happening, but it's being taken incredibly seriously. And there's moments in being an artist where you just think this is ridiculous, and you almost have to incorporate that into your practice, like a self-consciousness of how absurd what you're doing is, at the same time as like being deadly serious about it.
Yeah, I completely agree, especially with performance art, because I feel like there's so many associations, assumptions of it being kind of a bit of a joke, but also, taken really seriously by the correct people and then ridiculed by the other people. And I just think it's like so ripe for doing something that then like just fucks with that like churchy atmosphere and kind of allows there to be a laugh. Although I do think you never say that your work is funny, because then you're setting yourself up to a really difficult standard that's hard to maintain.
I was thinking that too, where it's like I don't write scripts like you would if you're writing comedy, where you know where the joke lands and you know where laughs are happening. I'm kind of going for just like a low level, like maybe you laugh at some point where you're like, what the hell?
Yeah, because you're uncomfortable as well. That's
there's like a
it's the absurdity. I think that's the right word for it. That the absurdity, I think, in both, that can sometimes make you kind of laugh out loud. And and I raise that as something I've been thinking about when we think about aging. It somehow, which is what I've been really writing about for a while now. It's something that makes us uncomfortable. You don't quite know what to do with it. And comfortable images, that images for women, inappropriate things and so on. So I think that there's a kind of, maybe there's a feminist.
Sometimes I find that so patronising though, when it's like, oh, here's an older lady doing like a funny, do you know what I mean? Do you look at that in what you're writing about?
It used to be like adverts, a lot of adverts where it would be like a granny on a motorcycle or something, and that would be funny, and you're like,
She's just on a motorbike, what's wrong with that?
I find it it's very patronising. It can often come from much younger, very kind of attractive women. It's a certain kind of feminism that it was sort of somehow you're supposed to be brave just because you're older and I don't know fat or want to make.
Yeah, basically the implication is that is like, oh, you haven't got the body that we're used to seeing.
That's right.
And therefore, like, you're really brave because you're showing it.
Indeed. And that's that kind of, so the inappropriate there is a challenge, or it's an accusation.
Yeah, and it's all socially it's constructed.
Absolutely.
There's also like, I think, a power to laughing at somebody, and it's maybe where I guess we're of a generation where, like, when I was, because also I lived in Edinburgh, and it's like Edinburgh Festival, and really, like, I don't know, but 95% or more of the comedians were men. Now there's more female comedians that are visible, but it really felt like a very male profession, comedy, and
that's
like
true.
And it, to me, I don't know, I think about it like if you have the power to make people laugh, you can laugh at somebody.
Yeah.
And you have in some ways power over them.
Yeah.
But if you as a woman make people laugh, and I wonder that if men are scared of women being funny because women will laugh at them. So
That's a quick.
Yeah.
Is it Margaret?
is it? Yeah.
Yeah. So she says, men are afraid women will laugh at them. Men are afraid women will laugh at them. Women are afraid men will kill them. That's the quote.
Okay, that's great. I've never heard that.
Well, that feels like a perfect moment to see if we have any comments, questions, thoughts, observations from our audience. And should we pass the microphone around? So if you can just wait for the microphone.
Thank you so much. That was really, really interesting. Just kind of being able to listen to such a range of works and approaches. I think what I'm really curious about, and I think it's also what really kind of elevates the experience of hearing about your works, is when it comes to the usage of, say, AI technology and also performance art. I was wondering how much Asian feel towards, say, using these tools or your body, the performances, these sculptures. And I guess my curiosity kind of lies in like the whole theme of taste and decency. So I'm in a generation where doom scrolling is, one of my favorite pastimes, of guilty pleasure. But I should be really guilty about it. Um, but for me, the question is kind of like, well, how much agency do I have when it comes to looking at something and determining whether it's good or bad? And so I guess, to kind of make my question a bit more specific, is say, like for Olivia, when you make your films and you use these AI technologies, I'm sure there's some scenes where you're like, that is not what I wanted. Do you use them or do you not use them? Or say for Rachel, these performances, perhaps the generative part is not from your performance, but for example, the audience's reaction, and you're like, this isn't really the part where you guys laugh, but okay, but yeah, I was wondering how much agency you guys feel towards that. Do you even feel the need for that? Or I don't know, is that even part of the practice?
I think it's a really good question. It's like I've thought a lot more about agency using AI than I ever have before. And I sort of think of it, and I don't actually think you want total agency and control over what you do as an artist. And like a lot of materials that are interesting to work with are interesting because they behave in a way that you can't totally predict. Paint is a little bit out of control, and like you work with ceramics, it cracks. It does things that are like it feels almost like the material has a little bit of a mind of its own. Whereas with AI, it really does have a mind of its own. And I thought that was a fun part of the process, and also messy in that you have an intention, you ask it to do a thing, it comes back with something you maybe didn't ask for, and it becomes blurred what is your idea and what's the idea that's been given back to you. That I think it would be very hard to disentangle that into like a clear sense of what your agency is and what the agency of the machine is. So yeah, I think it's like a really fascinating question.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I feel a very strong sense of agency in terms of my choices and how they fit with my conceptual framework. And so as long as I can kind of justify my decisions to myself within the kind of absurd backwards logic that I've made for that series, then I feel happy. And then other people, you can't control obviously what they think, but I'm always quite rigorous in terms of like, well, what does this action mean and talk to, and why am I making these choices? Yeah, and I think that makes me feel like even when I'm doing something that somebody might see as like a self-objectification, for example, for me it feels like a fuck you because I understand why I'm doing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think it's super interesting because I'm seeing basically like both of your answers are, I mean, I guess it's really essentially what taste or, is kind of like, I mean, this is why I'm doing it. Hence why whatever the result is, I mean, it's good, at least for me. And I guess when that collective then becomes together, then it's named taste. But fundamentally, like ages, I don't know, it's like a celebration of the contradictions, I think. That kind of align. I don't know. Now I'm kind of like my thinking is now going ahead of myself. That was the nuanced answers was very satisfactory. I think that is yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you for this amazing talk. I just had a very kind of more of a curiosity question. In our day and age, do you feel like using technology in your art practice becomes almost like a given pressure, or is it more of a fascination and a curiosity place where it comes from?
Yeah, I'm going to add that to that question for you because continuing on, I was wondering if before you used AI, you felt like a pressure to use it, or you felt like there was some things that came out of AI that sort of reminded you of your work or anything.
I was just fascinated to try it. I think what's mad about AI, I think we've got used to it, but like really when it like I know it's AI has been around for a long time, but the kind of advanced models of AI where you can just type in something and it generates an image, it's totally amazing. And it seemed to happen just overnight. And it's totally amazing with all the problems, accepting all the problems that come with AI. That I've been making digital images for like 15 years, and Photoshop updates. I mean, nothing much changes really. Like in a 15-year period, is pretty much the same technology, and you get used to how long it takes to make a digital image, and then overnight, I can just type it in and produce an image, and I can produce many of them quickly, and it's really insane. And I think that I don't know, almost like to kind of deal with how weird that is. We've had to be like, oh, it's fine, it's normal, or like whatever. But the part of me that's drawn to it is just that that's kind of incredible. And it also, to me, makes you question the whole idea of, and I think this is the kind of existential crisis in the arts of like, what is an artist if a machine can make art? And the whole romantic idea of what an artist is, and it coming from like human experience. If a machine can make art and the art is interesting, then it really throws into question whether our idea of what art is and what an artist is fundamentally, I don't know, flawed. And I think to a certain extent, people want to think, oh, but it's crap. Like what it makes is just like rubbish stuff. So it's never like something an artist could make. But I don't know if that's true. Like I've seen some quite amazing stuff that's made by AI that's like, to me also was interesting about it. I think there's also a big discussion about the idea that AI will replace humans or do things that humans can already do. But working with AI for moving image, it can make moving images that you just couldn't make before, like no visual effects could make some of the stuff you can make with AI. So to me, it's interesting that suddenly you can make images that you couldn't make before. So it's like there's a whole kind of reasons for curiosity.
Another question about, so this AI that you were doing 2 years ago is very 2 years ago. Like you can't really get it to, unless you actually really prompt it to make it distorted, make the baby and the mother like interact. Like where are you going now with AI? Because AI is not doing 6 fingers anymore. It's not doing all this stuff
Yeah,
anymore. So,
good
like,
point. I realized that because I've trained my own AI model, but I started training it on an old one, and then I produced a load of stuff, and then I used a newer AI model and took all the data from the old one and trained it on the new one. So I've almost like trained in the mistakes to the newer models. So really, I guess if the model's better, it can better produce the glitches that you want it to. And but
you train it to glitch.
to a certain extent, although you slightly lose track after a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. It's like it's much more controllable now. Whereas like even a year ago, if you asked an AI model to do something, it would usually make a mistake, or I don't know. I had this whole thing where I tried to make the storyboard for this film in AI, and you'd be like, remove the hat from that man, and it would remove it from the other man. You'd be like, no, the man on the left. Then it would put it back on the guy on the right, and you'd be like, oh god. So you kind of have this wild process where it's always misinterpreting what you're asking it to. But now it's almost a little bit uncanny that some of the newer models, like the Sora model, ChatGPT, that it does do what you ask it to quite accurately. And yeah, that's a different experience. Maybe I need to make an artwork about that. Maybe that's the point. Yeah.
Hi. I don't know if it's much of a question. It was more it was more sort of a general thought about the, like, whenever you generate anything of AI, it's not personal, right? And so it feels very, separate based, of which I kind of felt sort of pop art had that feeling to it as well, right? But at the same time, maybe there's more of a depth to pop art to some people because it's producing art. It's also questioning a lot of stereotypes and this, that, and the other, which maybe more of the classical arts didn't so much. Don't know where the question is, but
I think
do you kind of feel the same? This, if AI is obviously going to get to the point where it's not glitching and so on, but it's never going to satisfy the human aspect. It's that just a branching off that's going on.
like some kind of essential human desire to create things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if we can't understand, if we can't recognize a piece of music or a bit of writing, a bit of art, which is surely going to happen at some point.
Yes.
But it's the process of creating where the satisfaction lies. But then as an observer, I don't know.
I think there's like a perception of AI being like not having a process or something, or just being like an instantaneous thing. But this film has been like the hardest thing I've ever made. It's like the most insane process of all the things I've ever made. Like I've had to put things through various workflows and another workflow, and it's definitely a creative process. And there's no part of it that doesn't feel like that. You're making choices, and maybe like I was saying with that kind of material thing, you're working with a material that's a bit volatile, but that's not uncommon in a creative process, that you would want to let go and let a material do something that you don't expect. So no part of it felt uncreative. Or I didn't feel like, I've been an artist my whole life. I didn't feel at any point it was any different to working with anything pre-AI. So I think it's maybe a perception that that's the case with AI. And also sometimes I wonder if it's a fear from artists that like anybody can make art now. So, which maybe is quite a pop art thing, but like, you have some monopoly over the ability to create stuff. You've been to art college, all the rest of it. But the minute that it's that easy to generate things, anybody can have ideas and see their ideas through. So I don't know if there's a fear around that, that's maybe a separate idea.
Yeah.
Well, on that note of existential dread, thank Rachel and Rosie. It was really great. Thank you so much.